During our tenure as missionaries here in Mexico, we have lived in a variety of different places and homes across this beautiful country. My first home in Mexico was actually my 1974 Plymouth Voyager van, in which I lived for several months, while serving on my first missionary internship to Mexico in the summer of 1985. Parked on the ranch, which was my girlfriend's home, and the missionary compound of Mexico Maranatha Mission, my van was a comfortable and practical home on wheels, which gave me my first taste of van life as a college student and missionary wannabe. I had fixed it up back in Florida with a bunk, sink, skylight, and storage, plus fake fur on the dash, hippie curtains, and shag carpet. The next summer, I drove that van back to Mexico from New Jersey with my groomsmen to marry the love of my life. My wife and I were married on that ranch the next summer, went back to Florida, where our first daughter Amanda was born, then back to Mexico, where we moved into a small 4-room house there on the ranch property. Living room, kitchen, bedroom, and office. As we began having children, we subdivided the rooms to make a nursery and office, and another tiny bedroom painted pink for our little girl Amanda Lynn. We also added a bathroom by enclosing a section of the porch that wrapped around the whole house. That was how I learned to lay ceramic tile. It was a perfect little house for our little missionary family, and we lived there for 8 years. 4 more children were born while living on the ranch: Polly, Natasha, Wendy, and Penny. It was there that the Lord called our little boy home, his body buried in the cemetery on the hill overlooking the ranch. The other missionary family living on the ranch, Dawn's sister and her family, were packing up to leave the field and move to the U.S. Their house next door was much larger, and we began preparations to move in there after they vacated. But God had other plans. In His providence, we separated from MMM and found ourselves on our own. So we actually moved from the ranch into town, about 15 miles away. Cadereyta Jimenez. Civilization. We were told we wouldn't last 6 months on our own. That was almost 30 years ago, and I'm still here, serving in Mexico as I write this. In town, we rented another small house, but one with a huge yard, a giant side yard, an enormous backyard, perfect for our growing family. As now independent missionaries, we still received some support from the U.S., but also became tent-making missionaries, working part-time to make ends meet. But that's another story. It was really nice living in town. Everything was so close and convenient. The house was also conveniently located right next to the local Mormon church. God graciously provided, and we lived in that house for several years while tent-making and doing ministry. The house was right across the street from a giant open field, which was where the circus set up whenever they came to town. We went to quite a few shows back then. Eventually, we actually bought the ranch property when my in-laws retired as missionaries and moved to the United States, but we never moved back there. Small-town life and ministry was now our calling. We had a goat named Snow White, 3 ducks who laid eggs for us every day, several dogs, and lots of cuddly bunnies. Other furry critters that lived in our yard were not quite as adorable. Our whole yard was infested with huge hairy tarantulas. Sometimes you could go outside and find a half dozen of them on the ground, which was mostly dirt and weeds due to the hot and dry climate. We kept some as pets for a while. 2 of our daughters, Daphne and Calliope, were born while we lived in that house in town, and it was their first home. It was also the first house where I began hanging some of my musical instruments on the wall as decoration. As my collection grew, it became a tradition in every house we lived in after that. That tradition has since been passed on to the next generation. This house was where we transitioned to tent-making missionaries, teaching English in the living room and playtime in English for kids in the carport. It was also headquarters of our home-based business of Starfisher Advertising and the Consumidor de Cadereyta, both of which barely ever broke even, but somehow we survived. This home was also where our first independent missionary work was founded, Salt of the Earth Ministries. Later, this home also became the base of operations for the first emergency rescue squad in Cadereyta, the Grupo Amar, of which I was founder and commander. We enclosed our carport, and it became the dispatch and dorm for volunteers on duty, with ambulances parked out front, 24 hours a day for over 2 years, possibly the most stressful 2 years of my entire missionary career. This whole time, we had also been coordinating and hosting annual medical surgical brigades with healthcare professionals from a big church in the States, and even had plans to build a small hospital in town. But God had other plans. At a place in our missionary career, when it seemed like a good idea to associate with a mission agency again, we applied and raised support and came back to Catarata, much better funded for the ministry to which God had called us. This also meant we could move into a bigger house, as our family was also getting bigger. Our next move was into a brand new house beyond our dreams. It was a mansion compared to where we had lived on the ranch and across town. On one side, it was right across the street from a nice plaza, catty corner from some great tacos, and across the street from a loud norteño bar on the other side. 2 out of 3 isn't bad. 2 more children were born while we lived there. Our daughter, Gabby, and our son, Joey, who was actually born in that house. Not long after that, we launched a church plant project with a national pastor and started the Espacio Cultural, a cultural ministry center just around the corner from our home. Life couldn't get much better. We were very happy with 8 precious children under our roof and a challenging and rewarding ministry. All that came crashing down over the course of one summer when our mission organization pulled the plug on the project and canceled our life's work, or so we thought at the time. It was not the end, but rather the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another. God knew exactly what He is doing and was preparing us to move where He wanted us. It was time to start packing for new adventures on the horizon. Guadalajara, here we come. Thank you so much for listening to this true story from Memoirs of Mexico. If you enjoyed this story, or if it was a blessing to you, please feel free to like and subscribe to my channel. That would be a blessing to me. I upload a new true story every day. If you like to read, you can also order Memoirs of Mexico in paperback or ebook on Amazon.com. There's a link in the description. Thanks again for listening.